Well, welcome to the journey. This is a show that we have put together over the last 3 years, and we have had the opportunity for guests to come onto the journey. And this today, we have a special guest who I just recently met. Her name is Sherrie Barch. She has a wide variety of backgrounds. She's a mom, she's a wife, she's a CEO of a couple different companies, and also an author. And that is why we're going to be talking with Sherrie today. So, Sherrie, welcome to the journey. We've already had a couple conversations, so I'm really excited about us being able to talk today. And I know we have a handful of listeners that will be also intrigued to get to know you as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Sherrie, I always start off whenever we have a guest asking, so if Sherrie is caught having fun, what's Sherrie do for fun? If you have an opportunity for fun, what do you do for fun?
I am a big admirer of talent. So I love concerts and musicians and museums and artists, excuse me, from school plays to Broadway plays. I love it all. So I'm really all about being in the audience and being able to absorb people's talents. So usually I'm pretty eclectic in what I'm doing.
Sure, sure. So now, when you were growing up, were you involved with the arts at all, or how did that? Well, you specifically talking about the arts. I know it's probably not limited to that, but were you involved with the arts at all growing up?
No, not really. I have a reoccurring nightmare that I'm in a talent show and it's talent night, and I literally get on stage and I have no talent. I can't juggle, I can't sing, I can't play a musical instrument. Um, but if you reverse that, I think I'm one of the best audience members and fans that you ever meet. So
Gotcha.
I think I've just always enjoyed being entertained.
Gotcha. Well, I resemble that because I when I was growing up, when I was in college, I lived with a heavy metal band, a rock band, and I couldn't play any instruments. I was a bodybuilder at that time, so I would go to the shows, help set up the shows, help manage as far as setting gigs up, but I never played any music. And then later, when my daughter started getting into musicals. And my wife Diane was helping out backstage. I attended multiple shows of her shows, and I wouldn't necessarily call myself a theater dad, but I did thoroughly enjoy and recognize the developmental process that happens on a run of a show, that from the first opening night
Yes.
to the last show of the weekend, or a second weekend, how the cast comes even more together as the weekend unfolds.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's so much talent out there and so many people that are passionate about being able to have a forum and a stage to be able to share it. So I love it.
And now, sure, you have three children, four children,
I have three boys.
three boys, and their ages are from where to where?
They are currently 25, 23, and 20.
Okay, gotcha. And were they involved with the arts, involved with sports, when they were younger, or maybe even now?
Yes.
You were a fan of them, of course, but what
Yes.
activities that were they involved in?
So my oldest was an artist. So we have an art room that we've always had where it's just a creative room where there's always markers and chalk and paper and watercolors, and he was always creating. So our whole house is full of his art. My middle child was an athlete. So I would go to his games, like you were talking about with the play, to watch him progress and get better and better. So to be a spectator and understand, he played basketball. And then my youngest was actually in the theater. So in grade school, he was Scar in The Lion King,
Mm.
and played lead roles. And now he plays the guitar. He's played the guitar since he was 15. And he's a sophomore at Minnesota.
Oh,
And COVID is actually, he came back his freshman year from being locked up in the dorm and having to eat in the dorm and stay in the dorm. He came back playing Santana. So
oh.
there was a practice room in the basement of the dorm. So, there's the good and bad, but so yeah, they all have their own artistic qualities and admirable traits. So it's been fun to kind of watch them grow in their own different ways.
Sure, sure. Yeah. And I can definitely appreciate that as well. My wife being an artist, both my son got a minor or close to a minor degree in printmaking.
Oh,
And my daughter was in the
interesting.
performing arts, and she will sketch and draw, and Caleb's just as talented that way as well. But he played competitive sports. He was hockey, wrestling, and then played football all the way through college. And
Oh,
and so
wow.
so it
So
was I got the best of both worlds. So it was
yes,
good. It was good. Yeah. So
but again, it all fits into that just ability to help provide space for that growth and that confidence. And I love it. I love to be able to admire that talent.
So speaking of admiring talent, for a living, right? You have a couple different companies, and
Yes.
and tell us just a little bit about what you do with your companies, or what your companies do. You're the CEO, so what do your companies do?
Sure. So I have three different organizations, two that are recruiting companies and one that's a leadership consulting company. And they're all intertwined. One specializes more in healthcare executive leadership and search. The other is more of a regional firm that sits in Philadelphia and does a non-healthcare work. And then the leadership consulting company is something that wraps around both of those organizations and helping assess leaders, but also stands on its own as far
Mhm.
as being able to create opportunities for our clients to hire our team of coaches and help their leaders be more efficient, more effective, and as of late, actually cope with some of the crises that COVID has created,
Sure, sure.
especially in the healthcare
Yeah.
firm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, admiring talent, right? This is
Right?
another way that in the business world that as you've continued that as well, admiring talent, and then being able to help place them with organizations that would sounds like be a good fit for them.
Right. Place them and help develop them at the internal candidates as well. Yeah. And what's so interesting about the work, not unlike what we were talking about earlier, is you get to meet all these very interesting people that have their own story and
Mhm.
their own journeys and their own pathways to why they're doing what they're doing, why they're at the particular point in their career that they are. And it's just fun, but it is all about storytelling and your ability to tell your own story, but also to listen and be able to be curious and create an understanding of maybe motivations and aspirations. So it's a really fun career.
Over the break, I was reading a book, and it was talking about the secret of leadership, and it talked about that. That the foundational piece, I'm just simplifying it, but the foundational piece of leadership is character, and the part that most people are going to see is going to be the skills of that leader. But if the character isn't there and it's only focused on the skill development, um it'll be hard for people to want to be a follower of someone who just has a lot of good leadership skills but hasn't really developed that character, for them to be able to follow that. so
Yeah,
um
and
so I am
engage.
and I imagine that's part of what your one organization from leadership development, that's what you guys focus on.
Yes, yes, almost that executive presence and
Yep.
that ability to be able to convey your vision as a leader. And you can still have the competencies, but you have to be able to convey that and be able to allow people the opportunity to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So in the little bit of downtime that you have, besides being able to be a fan of the arts and sports and stuff, you wrote a book, and I had the good fortune in the last couple of weeks to read that book, and I'm always impressed with stories. I love listening to people tell their stories. Hence why I started this podcast. And the story that you wrote, the book that you wrote, is called Heaven's Bell. And why don't you tell us just a little bit about, where Heaven's Bell came from, it, the concept of Heaven's Bell, and kind of just give us a little bit of background on that.
Sure. It's a story that I had always had with me since I was a kid. And I always had this story that whenever I lost someone, close to me, or even somebody even in the neighborhood. I always just had this imagination that I was able to ring their bell in heaven and they would hear it and they would know that I'm thinking of them. And through the years, I told the story. Actually talked about the story a lot, but I only told the story 3 times in a meaningful way to someone that I thought could would benefit from hearing the story.
Okay.
And the third time I told it, the person that I told it to said, "You need to write it down. This story needs to happen." And I didn't identify as an author. I'm a storyteller. I was actually working on another book that I started prior to Heaven's Bell, because I tried to get a book coach to be able to help me to write the Heaven's Bell story. And she said, "No, I don't do children's books, but tell me more about what you're trying to accomplish." And so I started this other book. But then when COVID hit, I just thought, this book has to come out. This book needs to help, especially the children. I think it's for all ages, but for the children, I think just to be able to have that story, to be able to lean into it and talk about it. And the 3 times I told the story, it was more for children.
Mhm.
And so I think COVID just finally made me say, enough's enough. If not now, when? And I became an author.
There you go.
Voila!
Yep. And I think that's sometimes how it works, right? Is that we, you
It is.
know, and we talk about, the journey is really named after Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero's Journey. And Campbell talks about this idea that many times we will get a nudge, we will get a prompting to do something. He refers to that as the call. And typically, even though we may get excited about it, we may think of the possibility, typically we're going to refuse the call because it stretches us out of our comfort zone. we start
Exactly.
we start doing the what if it doesn't go well, what if it failed, what if I don't have what it takes, whatever it may be. um,
Yes. 100% accurate, Kevin. That's exactly, I had so many barriers in front of me. I'm not an author. What if this doesn't turn out well? What if people don't like it? All those things that you go through. But I think my desire to want to help people
mhm.
finally outweighed all those barriers. And the call to action for me was COVID and timing. And we were with a team, we were able to get it out very quickly.
Well, and I think the idea that as you started with this was that you want to help people, and if it ends up being the thing that is calling us is just that, to see some unknown person that it might help, might be a light in their darkness, then
Yes.
then that in itself allows us to have the courage to face our own demons, which is part of our own journey, right? And we all have
Yes.
them, in spite of people thinking they've seen us with success in other areas. The current battle is is just that. The current dragon is the dragon we're facing at that moment.
Yes. And it's not even seen to others.
Yep.
Because you're busy putting all those stops in place when they're just make believe.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, very much our perceptions, right, of the things that are holding us back and trying to protect us, when in actuality, there's not much protection if we're stifling something that's bigger than us inside us.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so
Even with good feedback, I had really strong feedback from the times that I did tell it. And I know that was tucked back in my brain somewhere. And I think I drew on that positive regard to be able to push through, like you said, those demons or dragons,
mhm.
and release the story.
So what I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, I would like to, for our listeners, I'd like to read the original story, which is part of the book, Heaven's Bell, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
So the original story that you wrote down, if I remember correctly, you told me that you wrote it in 10 minutes. It's the story that had been in your head, and like you said, you had shared it 3 times before that. So you didn't write the whole book in 10 minutes. You just
No, no,
you
no.
wrote the story in 10 minutes. So
Right.
so let me go ahead and read the original story. Your Heaven's Bell. Do you know what happens when our loved one dies and go to heaven? Well, they open their eyes and see bright, beautiful bells and hundreds, maybe even thousands ringing. Heaven's bells are ringing and welcoming your loved one to heaven. And your loved one is smiling and so happy to be in heaven, surrounded by beautiful bells and the music they make together. And as you and each one of their loved ones down on earth say goodbye, a bell is hung in heaven. And guess what? Did you know what? Every time we think about our loved one of their bell rings. It does. Your bell has its own special ring. Your loved one will always know you are thinking of them and sending your love when they hear your heaven's bells ring. Each ringing bell represents one special relationship on earth. Each bell in your loved one's cozy place in heaven represents someone they may have helped, shown kindness toward, or loved, a life that they touched. These relationships and memories keep the bells ringing. As the years go by one, the bells slowly stop ringing. As the bells become old, worn out, and silent, our loved one in heaven becomes more and more excited. Yes, excited. You see, when all their bells in heaven stop ringing, it's because all of you are together again in heaven. It's a big celebration in heaven that day with dancing and singing and probably cake too. Think about the bells you are creating all the time, every day. Maybe you create a beautiful bell for a neighbor when you help them or for your friend who is sad and needs your help. Your acts of kindness and every relationship you develop will create bells for you and your special loved ones. Creating your heaven's bell gives happiness here on earth and makes music in heaven. Go find opportunities to create your bells and think of your loved ones often so you can ring all those heaven's bells already hung in heaven. So Sherry,
Thank
I
you.
could go in a lot of different directions with that, and probably most immediate I could go to is approximately 2 months ago my dad died,
Oh,
and there has been more than a couple times uh, since I've read the book that now when I think of my dad, I'm now it isn't just me thinking of him, it's me having reframing that as if he knows.
oh, thank
So
you.
so thank you.
Yeah, it's like you're getting me choked
Yeah.
up.
Didn't know I was going to even talk about that today. So,
Yes,
but
good. Look,
but
oh, okay.
uh, but I do believe, I think that was your intent, right? Your intent
Yes.
was that for wherever the readers at, that they are able to then now have a possible shift in their perception about life, about afterlife, about heaven, about loved ones, all those things.
And that really is what happened when the book went out. The book is a quick read. I mean, what, an hour?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
hour 15, if and it's there's little pictures in there. It's kind of like a Hardy Boys,
yeah.
here's a little sketch picture, and you read it. What was so interesting to me, and what's developed, I think, more of my desire to want to talk about the book, is the feedback that I'm receiving, random emails and voicemails and emails. It isn't about the character development of Cody,
Mhm,
or it's what the story does to the reader.
mhm,
When you're done with the story, the reader is in a different place.
yeah,
The reader has the opportunity to be able to imagine what to do with their thoughts and their memories, and apply it to maybe using their own courage to have conversations about the person that they lost. I had one mom who said she read the book, and after she read it, she realized that she was never talking about her mom because it always made her sad. And she has two young girls that never heard about this wonderful person because she never wanted to be sad in front of her daughters. But once she read the book, she was able to use the story, but then also frame these wonderful memories of their grandmother that they've never met, in a way that mom's happy and I want to hear more about grandma.
mhm,
So it's just it's a catalyst, it's a tool. And I knew the reaction I received from the 3 times I told the story verbally, but it's happening with the book. It's just amazing. I'm very, very happy. It's making a difference. We just need to get the word out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I can definitely, that was my experience. I mean, I read the book and I appreciated the book for the story. I appreciated the book for um, for the message that was there. And then as the couple weeks have gone by, I noticed that the story was really impacting how I was uh, thinking about my dad, thinking about my father-in-law, thinking about other individuals in my life who are in heaven. And so it did exactly what you said. It now had planted a seed, and
Yes.
it gave me an opportunity to frame it differently. So it was, and I think this is a part for me as a therapist that's important. It wasn't an intellectual exercise, meaning a lot of times when we talk to someone about grief, or we talk to them about it's okay, they're in heaven with with God or Jesus or whatever your belief system is, that there's an intellectual piece to that, a cognitive piece to that. But this allows it, this what I took away from it, it allowed it to be more of an emotional response to it, more um, on one hand maybe a catharsis, but it allowed it to be a plane in which I could then have a different line of communication with my loved one, um, and feel that, and feel
Yes.
that, and so there was something different about that, and I'm probably not doing a very good job putting it into words right now, but
No, I think that's a great observation. And that truly is, I think, where those responses come from. When people are done with the story, I've heard people describe it as I had a hospice grief counselor say, I do this for a living, and I don't think I'm ever going to think about my loved ones again without ringing their bell. And it's just such a peaceful place to think about and be able to move move forward with my memories and move forward with my thoughts versus maybe have that kind of striking grief that kind of shuts down that emotional plane, like you talked about. I had one person, a gentleman probably in his early 50s, tell me that he read it and didn't realize that he was reading it on his mother's birthday, who had passed.
mm,
And he said, I've always been bad showing my emotions and really not wanting to talk about death and dying. It's just not something that my family did or that we talked about. But he said it gave me courage. It gave me a place to be able to start from, to say, no, I do want to talk about my mom.
mhm.
And again, it's really geared toward 8 to 12-year-olds, but I'm getting more feedback and response from really the adults.
Yeah,
And I think the adults liking it then can talk to the children.
right.
So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
Best
Well,
laid plans.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think, as we've talked before, you know, death, death and dying, grief, these are all things that in our society, specifically our society, we don't do a very good job of talking about.
Right.
Kind of in the example that you gave earlier, is that I don't want to be uncomfortable, and then I don't want me being uncomfortable making someone else uncomfortable. So we have a tendency to suppress those things, and then this, and just attempt to put them into a box. And so I think the story allows it to be able to have, again, a platform or a frame in which that it's a way of honoring our loved one.
Right.
You
And I've
know,
I've even had people say to me, I don't want to read the book because I know somebody's going to die. I know it's about death and dying, and I don't want to be sad.
mhm,
My own brother said that to me. I said, hang
mhm,
on a second. So I walked him through the story, without necessarily ruining it, but had to like give him some training wheels around the story so that he was able to say, okay, I'm gonna read it, and then as a big brother does when he was done, he's like, that wasn't so bad.
Well,
But it really is, it really is about Cody and Ashley, and the book lives in parallel universes. So Cody is in heaven, kind of heaven. It's not necessarily about God and Jesus. It's outer space. It's what an 11-year-old would describe heaven as, with grand, great hallways and the bell room. And then Ashley's on earth, missing him, but also living her long life. And the reader gets to go back and forth between the two, and how there maybe is an interconnection between the two universes. And then in the end, they come together again, and it's pretty cool.
There's a part in the book, and maybe you could explain a little bit. There's a part in the book where, and I've listened to other people share these stories in counseling, where there is an opportunity for an interaction after Cody's in heaven, and Ashley is attempting to do life but missing Cody, because they were best friends. There was a moment in which there was uh, it would be, we would refer to it as an interaction between the two of them. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I think, I think all of us have either experienced or been told by other people that, um, there's a vivid dream, or there is, something that happened that reminded them of the individual that they've lost. And it's real to that individual. And I think Ashley experienced that, where there was an opportunity to really want to talk about it. And her parents play a very strong role in this book. And the parents gave her the opportunity to be able to talk about it. She also journaled about it. And that tied into the other universe that the book is talking about. So we're able to kind of tie that all together and realize that however we want to validate that and experience that, it's okay. It's okay. And that's really what the book is trying to convey, that there's many different ways that we grieve, and how we express that. If we as people that love one another can build that safe space, and however we want to express it, that's really important. And I think in that place that you're talking about, that's what she was experiencing. And her dad let her and talked about it
Yeah, and
and
he
agreed.
and encouraged her to share about it, and that,
Mhm.
I think that, it was a huge, example of the benefits of writing things out, journaling and writing those things out, and then also the huge benefit of how an adult can come into a young person's life, or a person coming into another person's life, and being able to create space for them to share that story, because once again,
Yes.
it crystallized that experience.
Yes. And I put journaling pages in the back,
Mhm.
just in case when you're done with the story, if there's things you do want to write down or things that you're thinking about, um, it's a place to be able to capture those, or draw. There's also drawing space, because I
Mhm.
don't know,
Yeah.
some people draw, some people write, some people talk,
Yeah.
and it's a space to capture that.
So I think, and I've had, different people over time, tell me, like you said, there may be someone who says that every time they see a cardinal,
Yes.
that reminds them. Or, and I have another friend of mine who lost her son to suicide, and when she sees a dragonfly, the dragonfly, and is representative. And I know that, for me, as I was going through a certain developmental, spiritual development time period in my life, when I would see a feather on the ground, that, obviously wasn't intended to be there, that would be my connection with God. That would be a grounding or a reminder. And so I think
Yes.
being able to have open up that pathway, invite people into that. Each person's going to be a little bit different. I've I've interviewed individuals who've had near-death experiences, and I've read about the research on near-death experiences. And when individuals have those spiritual experiences, those, could be a near-death experience, it could be something that may not be near death, but it's clearly a spiritual experience. Their world has changed.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't look at the world the same way ever again.
Right. And there's a confidence to that. There's a belief there that they can move forward with, and they don't have to convince anyone else. But where we can support that is really important, because we're all seeing our world and our universe and our journey completely different. It's not the same. And there's space for all of it.
Absolutely. And I think, kind of just with that aspect of it, of this is, I think, you said about the time period of this story being put into print during COVID, during a pandemic. We're still dealing with that aspect of it. We're
Yes.
still dealing with a lot of things that are going on, economy wise, political wise, health wise, a lot of uncertainty. This story is a story that can be utilized to ground. It's about kindness. Yes, it's about someone who dies, and but it's a happy ending. There's
Oh,
a
yes.
there's it's there is sadness, but there's also, there is this aspect that there is a happy ending to it.
Yes. As my sister-in-law was also trying to convince my brother, look, yes, there's some sadness in it, but the majority of the book is about those parallel paths. And she said the way she described it, which was pretty cool, was the overwhelming amount of peace at the end of the book moved me in a way that I haven't been able to do since my mother died. And one of the three stories I read was or what that I talked about verbally or orally, was to my niece who shut down when her grandmother died.
Mm,
And they were worried about her because no, she wasn't talking. And so I just came in with a bell and told that story that you read
mhm.
very briefly, and she immediately started talking about her grandmother and that she was on a young horse in their backyard around a young oak tree, and her hair was brown and she wasn't in any pain, and her head was back and she was laughing, and you could have heard a pin drop. But what it took was to move from what was happening to that ability to imagine
Mhm.
and to allow space for those that artistry, right? That voice, that young child, to have a forum that she felt safe enough in to go, yeah, here's what I think. It was really moving. But I like the way my sister-in-law described it at the end, to say it's an overwhelming piece. Like, if we can choose to be upset and sad, can we choose to maybe bring some of that peace along with our grief?
Mhm.
And not that it's going to go away, but maybe they can ride together. And I'm hoping this story at least provides a little opportunity to do that.
Well, and I think that is sometimes where, uh, when I was trained in to working with individuals who are grieving, is part of the training was to invite people to tell me about memories of this person.
Okay.
Tell me about grandma. Tell me about Bobby, your friend who died. Tell me why was she your friend? What did you guys do together? What was the fun things that you remember? One, it made sense to me to do that because it was me getting to know the person that they were sad about.
Right.
And and I think later, recognizing what was happening within the person, is that the person was sad because they had cherished times with them. More times than not, it was those cherished times is what they were sad about. Now sometimes they're sad, a person's sad about what never happened, right?
Right.
It's about
Never got a
law.
chance.
It, yeah, never, things that never happened. Either one, because the person wasn't capable, at the time for whatever reasons, or they were, they happened a few times when the person who's grieving wanted them to happen more times, um, whatever that may be. But I think either way, it's an opportunity, it's a platform in which to invite people to talk about it, or to draw about it, or to express, their thoughts and feelings about it, either way. So
Yeah.
so Sherry, tell me, if you could, we're at the beginning of 2022, if you could throw something out there at the beginning of 2022 that you would like to have happen with Heaven's Bell this
Mm.
year, what would you like to happen with Heaven's Bell this year?
You know, I go back to helping people, and for me, it's so many people have experienced tragedy with COVID, and a lot of children have been, have experienced loss. I think about media and what they're seeing on TV, what we're all seeing and what we're all experiencing. So I think for me, it's getting the word out there about this story and getting it into the hands of people that are trained like you. I'm not a grief counselor, I'm not a social worker. So I view Heaven's Bell as a tool for you and others like you that are making a difference to use and in any way that they see fit. And then I think about our hospital workers that are, holding up devices to patients and their mental well-being. And is this an opportunity to help them? So I think 2022 for me is I'm on a mission to be able to share this story in any way that we can.
Perfect. Well, we're going to do what we can on our end to try to help you accomplish that this year.
Thank you.
And so one of the things I'd like us to do, if we say this in the air, maybe we'll commit to it. Then to have you back on the show, at least two more times this year, to see how things are progressing, and
Wonderful.
how things are going with it. If someone wanted to get a copy of Heaven's Bell or be in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, Amazon. So you can go to Amazon and purchase Heaven's Bell there. It's also an Audible. We did an Audible as well, just because depending on the needs and sometimes people take in more listening versus reading. It's also Kindle and then paperback. Or you can go to heavensbell.com and read more about the story and me and other quotes that people might entice you to look at it or think more about it.
Perfect. Well, Sherry, so impressed with the book. Yeah, I looked on your website. Your website it looks great. It's www.heavensbell.com, and then and your contact information is on there. And
Yep.
so look
Sherrie at heavensbell.com if
great.
you want to
Well,
reach out.
perfect. Well, I look forward to more conversations and look forward to hearing more stories about how this particular story has helped people to celebrate when someone passes on, and being able to honor them, and honor their relationship and honor their life. So thank
Thank
you again
you.
for being on.
And
So
thank you for your support, Kevin. I appreciate it.
as always, for anyone who's listening today, definitely take the opportunity to check out Sherry's Heaven's Bell website, and take a look at the story as well as purchasing the book. You never know, either yourself or someone else may need to know this story to be able to share with someone else as well. And as always, thank you for being here, and I look forward to being with you again next week.